The U.S. bishops voted to draft a new teaching document on the Eucharist. What is the intent behind the new statement? And will it be used to deny pro-abortion politicians communion? The Papal Posse, Robert Royal and Father GERALD Murray, are here with in-depth analysis and the big stories of the week. Later, hate crimes against Catholics here in the U.S. are on the rise. Why don't we hear more about it in the media? Senior editor at the Federalist, Christopher Bedford, is here with a report. And finally, EWTN hosts Father John Trigilio and Ken Briganti are here to talk about their new book, Web of Faith, The World Over, begins right now.
Now, Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. We have a great show for you tonight. If you'd like to comment, send me a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. Lots to cover this evening. Let's begin. At the conclusion of last week's Bishop Spring meeting, they voted to move forward with a draft of a teaching document on the Eucharist. Now, the document is intended to be a formal statement on the meaning of the Eucharist in the life of the Church, so the bishops say. The measure passed by a vote of 168 to 55, with 6 abstentions. Here, with in-depth analysis on all this and much more, is the Papal Posse, editor-in-chief of the CatholicThing.org and St. John Henry Newman visiting chair at Thomas More College, Robert Royal, and from Manhattan, canon, lawyer, and priest of the Archdiocese of New York, Father GERALD Murray. Thank you both for being here. Now, you would have sworn the Inquisition was being reinstated, gentlemen, when this was announced last week. We already have canon law, and there's a stack of documents, not to mention papal encyclicals on the Eucharist. Bob, why is any of this needed, and what is it?
Well, it is needed. And you're right that there's going to be more than what we have here that's needed. But as Bishop Liam Carey of Baker, Oregon said, this is an unprecedented situation because we've got a president of the United States who isn't just sort of passively tolerating many of the things that are threats to the church. He's actively advocating now for federal funds to support abortions, making them more widely available. So we're in a new situation here. We've never had the chief executive of the United States being a professed Catholic, but at the same time doing so many things that are anti-Catholic. Now, I praised the bishops. I wrote a column on this last Monday about it because we're really at a kind of American Rubicon, or an American Catholic Rubicon. If we cross this bridge without our bishops speaking back forcefully against our president, our so-called Catholic president doing this, they lose all credibility, as several of the bishops said. I've described this as brave at this point because we know that they're going to get hammered and there are going to be some ugly days ahead. And it's even beautiful in a way that they've decided to maintain their intention here despite all the pressure from the outside. But when it's all said and done, well, you're right, we've had other documents, we have canon law, we have other documents. This document may be able to help bishops support one another in actually doing something, but the proof is going to be in the pudding because mere words are not going to stop this horrible situation, this horrible, unprecedented situation that we find ourselves in.
I want to play you Joe Biden's reaction to this document and concerns that he might be denied communion. Listen.
The Catholic bishops are moving on this resolution that would prevent you and others who've supported abortion from receiving communion. Are you concerned about the rift in the Catholic Church, and how do you feel personally about that?
That's a private matter, and I don't think that's going to happen. Thank you.
Is it a private matter, Father Jerry, and what do you think is going to happen here?
It's not a private matter because the President of the United States, like every other Catholic, is bound by the law of the Church. And as regards abortion, he defies the Church. Catholics who support what are grave injustices, such as legalized abortion, have to be not only reminded that they're in error, they have to be encouraged to repent and retract. And we know that President Biden, as Bob said, he's not simply someone who tolerates abortion, he promotes it. In fact, he wants it to be federally funded. He wants it to be widespread. So what we're dealing here is a major crisis in which the authority of the church is called upon to enforce canon law. Canon 915 says that those who are persistent, obstinately, and manifest public grave sin, they are not to be given the sacraments, and that's precisely what's at stake here. Everybody knows it. A document about the nature and the gift of Holy Communion is always welcome. But the reason we're at this point is that Archbishop Gomez, right after the election, formed a committee of bishops to formulate a response because, the average Catholic in the pew says, I know the Catholic Church is against abortion. I know Joe Biden's a Catholic. He supports abortion. Why is it that he's being let go scot-free at this point? It's for the good of all American Catholics. It's good for President Biden that, in fact, he'd be told, unless you change your position, not only should you not go to communion, if you try to, it will be denied to you because it doesn't benefit you or anyone else.
But Father Jerry, contrary to the clamor, and we're going to get into more of it, that this is generating among politicians and the media, the truth is, if you read what the Bishops' Committee on Doctrine is saying, all they're going to do is write a document reflecting on the beauty of the Eucharist and its place in the Church. They're not going to be calling anybody to repentance or saying, you, President Biden, or you, Speaker Pelosi, or you, Governor Schwarzenegger, need to stop what you're doing in public, repent if you want to come to communion. They're not saying that. They're not. Are they?
Okay, they had a press release I saw which identified what they're going to do. Let's see how well that goes, because indeed, they said no one was going to be denied communion. That's not the purpose of their document. Now, wait a minute. This whole discussion got started as regards the current crisis with President Biden, Archbishop Gomez, and the question of communion. If you watch the bishops' meeting, you know that a lot of the bishops spoke very strongly that their credibility as representatives of God and of the gospel, it's at stake if they don't tell the wayward sheep to stop wandering and call them back to unity. So let's see what the discussion leads to. But if, as Bob says, if they do nothing, if they produce a document that could have been produced before this whole thing started and it says nothing special about it, then it really will be a defeat for the Church.
Shortly after the bishops voted to draft this document, Catholic politicians really went after the bishops. Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu tweeted this: "Dear USCCB, I'm Catholic and I support contraception, a woman's right to choose, treatments for infertility, the right for people to get a divorce, the right of same-sex marriage. Next time I go to church, I dare you to deny me communion." Your thoughts, Bob, on this approach? What's happening here?
Well, look, there's been this long time confusion, and it's been our bishops have tried to clarify it. Cardinal Ratzinger tried to clarify this way back in 2004, and it was none other than Cardinal McCarrick who misrepresented his letter to our bishops when John Kerry, another Catholic, was running for president. Look, abortion is a different issue. The politicians try to lump this together as if it's a matter of sex. And so, like homosexuality and transgenderism, you can have different opinions about that. Yes, abortion is related to sex in the sense that it is the backstop for the sexual revolution. Let's be quite blunt about that, okay? But what is particular about abortion is that it is the destruction of innocent human life. It's a question of violence against human dignity. So the other issues are issues that we're going to have to debate, and we have to try to educate and evangelize. But this is a matter of hundreds of thousands of human beings being slaughtered every year, not only by a right to choose, but by our federal government subsidizing, paying for, advocating for, sending money to Planned Parenthood to encourage this sort of thing. This is a different issue. And there are many Catholics, quite intelligent Catholic politicians. Tim Kaine, my own senator, I'm from Virginia, Tim Kaine, who went to Harvard Law School. He's a very intelligent man, but he himself came out with a statement. He says, I voted for the Hyde Amendment. And so it's wrong for the bishops to speak up about this. It's not. This is a defining issue. And those other issues, by the way, even though they aren't defining in the same sense as abortion, are coming to be more and more, not only here, but in Italy and the EU. Just today, the Parliament has voted to recommend that abortion is a medical right, and that conscience clauses, people resisting out of conscience reasons, are engaged in denying medical service. That part of the anti-Christian, anti-human culture that exists is becoming more and more threatening. It is seeking to discredit the church and to actually limit its activities. But I still want to say abortion is something different, and we must constantly go on and hammer at this. I want to say specifically, I want to say this on the record on the air tonight. I think Archbishop Cordileone has been, his name means Lionheart. I think he has been a Lionheart on this. But he's got Nancy Pelosi in his district. And if after all the strong words, and I don't mean to beat up on him because I admire him greatly, I think he's been very courageous. San Francisco is a crazy place. But if he doesn't do something about a figure like Nancy Pelosi, who basically has the same views as Joe Biden and wants to advance the same problems, then I don't know how seriously we can take those wonderful and even beautiful words.
Father Jerry, nearly 60 Catholic House Democrats issued what they called a statement of principles. It was aimed at the bishops' conference and asked them to cease the weaponization of Holy Communion. They wrote, and this was led by Congressman Rosa DeLauro. She wrote a similar statement of principles years ago. We believe the separation of church and state allows for our faith to inform our public duties and best serve our constituents. The sacrament of Holy Communion is central to the life of practicing Catholics, and the weaponization of the Eucharist to democratic lawmakers for their support of a woman's safe and legal access to abortion is contradictory. Father Jerry, first your reaction to this, and then I'd like you to react to what Bob just said. If the bishops individually don't do something, and they're the only ones who can do it, not the whole lot of them or the conference of them, what good is any of this?
Well, first to the Democrat, Rosa DeLauro and her Democrat colleagues' letter. The letter is self-contradictory, and it reveals precisely that they don't really want to submit to the Catholic Church the way Catholics do. They want to pick and choose. We call that cafeteria Catholicism, because they say we are in favor of church teaching. We believe church teaching on human dignity, but they aren't, because they think children who are not born should be legally killed at the request of the parents. It's very, very disturbing that a group of Catholic congressmen would be so ignorant about the nature of the faith and then try to influence others by saying that they, in fact, know what Catholicism is and the bishops are wrong. Now, as regards the denial of Holy Communion, meaning the enforcement of Canon 915, it is up to each individual diocesan bishop. And as we've said on air before, it's most regrettable that in the Archdiocese of Washington, the Archbishop, Cardinal Wilton Gregory, has said that he will continue to have communion given to the President of the United States. I don't know how that could be. That is a mistaken understanding of what Canon 915 says. You cannot promote the mission of the Church and then treat the sacraments as something that can be given to people who repudiate in a most public way the nature of Catholic belief. And Bob is right. Abortion is something that has to be treated differently than other questions that arise. Bishop Cordileone is a good man. I think he's doing a great job leading his diocese and leading the fight on many things. But when the discussion comes to a conclusion, if Nancy Pelosi is still being given communion in that diocese without changing her tune, then we really have not accomplished much. So, yeah, Raymond, this really is a point where the Catholic Church has to catch up for years of neglecting enforcing Canon 915. Cardinal Burke did in St. Louis when he was the Archbishop there, and he was not taken up by his fellow bishops. So it can be done, and it should be done.
Well, it was done here in New Orleans, Archbishop Rummel, because there were people blocking the ending of segregation in the schools here.
Oh, yes.
So he excommunicated a number of people, not only denied them communion, publicly excommunicated them. And he did that so that people would realize the grave sin of racism at play in the lives of these children. Now we're dealing with the actual lives of children. Surely this rises to a higher level on the moral scale. But you know the question that comes forward, Father Jerry, wait a minute, you're going to call out Democratic congresspeople for support of abortion rights, but you let Republicans who support the death penalty off the hook. You would say what quickly?
No, the death penalty is a different matter. The Catholic Church has spoken of the legitimacy of the death penalty as a moral, legal instrument for its whole history. Now, Pope Francis doesn't like the death penalty, and he instructed that the Catechism of the Catholic Church change the wording to say that it's inadmissible. That's not a theological category that we're familiar with. And in fact, no rationale that supports the idea that the death penalty offends human dignity has been given. When I read the document coming from the Doctrine of the Faith, I said, this is not correct. You know, in the Old Testament, God authorizes and commands the death penalty for certain sins, certain crimes. And, you know, the Holy See itself, when they had the Papal States, they were executing criminals. The Church has never seen the death penalty as equal to abortion. The death penalty is for people guilty of crimes. So we should not make false equivalencies here. And let's be honest. Abortion is a grave crime, but it's supported by basically liberal left-wing people in the United States. And those that don't want to contradict them just look away. It shouldn't be that way. Whether you're left or right, you should all say that human rights have to be respected for born and unborn.
Bob, the other point that I think is often overlooked is when you look at public executions, capital punishment in the United States, in 2019, there were 17 executions. There were more than 600,000 abortions in that same year, according to CDC numbers, which are probably low. So that gives you a sense of the gravity and the vast expanse of what we're talking about. Bob, Representative Jared Huffman of California, who was not a signatory of that statement, tweeted out the following. He said, if you're going to politically weaponize religion by rebuking Democrats who support women's reproductive choice, then a rebuke of their tax-exempt status may be in order. Is this a way to keep the church silent? Politicians threatening the tax status of the church if she holds people accountable for the faith to which they attest freely?
Well, I would like to see that that law case when it comes before our Supreme Court, because our Supreme Court is very protective, by and large, of religious rights in our country. Look, the weaponization that took place here already has been working for years. And this Father is right that what we're paying the price of right now is years of neglect of saying and doing something about this horrible practice with which we're involved, namely abortion. So they can try to threaten the church's tax status. I don't think that that's going to move forward in any kind of legal way, because religious bodies have a right to comment on issues. They can talk about the sanctity of life. They can tell people, I mean, is it a violation of church and state to say to Nancy Pelosi, sorry, you can't come forward for communion? And if there is also a Republican who is a pro-abortion advocate, I mean, it has to be a strong scandal that's being created. You also would say that about a Republican. So it's not as if it's partisan. It has nothing to do with the parties at all, except for the fact that the Democrats have gotten so seriously into this abortion regime. You know, when that statement by the 60 Democrats in Congress came out, they quoted from Christopher Delis Laici, the document about the role of lay people in the church. And it's a preposterous way that they quoted. A reader of the Catholic thing saw the column that I wrote on Monday about this, and he sent me this. He said, they quote that lay people should have some input, which of course they should in church decisions. But he says the proper section for them to have drawn out is this, and I'm just going to read a brief bit of it. The inviolability of the person, which is a reflection of the absolute inviolability of God. This is John Paul II now. Finds its primary and fundamental expression in the inviolability of human life. Above all, the common outcry, which is justly made on behalf of human rights, for example, the right to health, to home, to work, to family, to culture, is false and illusory if the right to life, the most basic and fundamental right and the condition for all other personal rights, is not defended with maximum determination. Now, that is a shepherd who knows what's going on and expresses his opinion clearly. I think our bishops can do that, and I think they can even do things without running afoul of the legal system.
I want to move on to Cardinal Maril Gambetti, whom Pope Francis appointed as the new archpriest of St. Peter's Basilica in February. He issued a clarification this week regarding the reasons for the suppression of private masses at St. Peter's Basilica. This began, by the way, on March 22nd. In a new letter, Cardinal Gambetti emphasizes the value of concelebration of the Mass, as expressed in his words at the Second Vatican Council's Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy. He writes, "It is to be stressed that whenever rites according to their specific nature make provision for communal celebration, involving the presence and active participation of the faithful, this way of celebrating them is to be preferred, so far as possible, to a celebration that is individual and quasi-private. When it is possible, it is more than appropriate for priests to concelebrate, also given the fact that a regular alternation of the presider is foreseen for the concelebrations that ordinarily take place in St. Peter's Basilica." Father, what do you make of any of this? This looks like Greek to me.
Yeah, they're trying to justify the decision to end the practice, which goes back centuries, that priests who show up at St. Peter's Basilica could celebrate Mass on the many side altars. That has now been forbidden. And then those priests that want to celebrate in the extraordinary form have to do so in one of the downstairs chapels at St. Peter's. The alternative is that priests and any faithful with them have to go to one of the concelebrated Masses in the Italian language. The problem is many of those pilgrims don't speak Italian, many of the priests don't, and they came to Rome with groups, or they have faithful already in Rome who want to go to a Mass in their own language. Unfortunately, this has been a big mess, in my opinion. St. Peter's Basilica is huge. You can celebrate Mass at many chapels, not interfering with anybody else. The concelebrated Mass can go on for people who speak Italian, but the effect of this, unfortunately, has been to render St. Peter's in the morning into largely a place where tourists wander around, and then a couple of maybe 3 or 4 Masses are offered in one place, but the side altars are now not being used on a regular basis. So I celebrated many Masses there in St. Peter's. It's very disturbing to think that for reasons that are not convincing, I won't be able to do that.
Yeah, it's all, look, at this rate, they may not have too many tourists or takers if they keep all this other stuff up. Gambetti's letter, however, says that, quote, "everything possible must be done to fulfill the wishes of the faithful and priests as foreseen by the motu proprio Summorum Pontificum." Of course, that was Pope Benedict's 2007 document allowing wider celebration of the old rite, the extraordinary rite. What's going on here, Bob? Yeah, I mean, there were reports that they were trying to limit the Latin Mass. Now it's saying, well, we'll try to accommodate it whenever we can.
Well, I expect to get time off in purgatory for having read that document, because it was a word salad.
Me too.
Even for the Vatican, and the Vatican can put out some incredible documents. It was really quite something. You know, I've heard different things from people in Rome. Some people tell me that the Holy Father was angry one day because he thought that priests were just ducking in fast and saying Mass is fast, and they wanted to bring people together. And there seemed to be, it's shooting in so many different directions that it's hard to know what it is, except that it looks like they're being less strict than they initially gave the impression of being. And to even quote that document, Summum Pontificum, is already to have made a large concession. I go back, Cardinal Newman, when he was still a Protestant, was in the Milan Cathedral, and he just loved the fact that there was so much going on that was so diverse. And he says, you know, one part is there's a Mass over here and somebody's ringing a bell there and you can't even see what's going on somewhere else. And he says, it's great. People are going about their business, this person doing this, that person doing that, allowing that person to do what he's doing without caring as he's doing his own. He said it's a kind of world to be in a great cathedral. And I think that that's the image that somehow it's being lost here in this attempt to bring everybody together. The church is diverse. We keep talking about this and how we want, you know, we want decentralization, and we want, you know, more diversity. And one of the ways we used to have that was all those different Masses. And anyone who's attended a Mass, sort of a pickup Mass, even sometimes in St. Peter's, knows how wonderful that could be, where you mind your own business, somebody else is doing something else. But it's just all glorious.
Well, yeah, I don't understand how enforcing this 1970s, kind of kumbaya vision of the faith is in any way diverse or inclusive. I just don't see it. I agree with you. On Monday, Pope Francis appointed 12 new members of the Vatican's highest court, the Supreme Tribunal of the Apostolic Signatura. He included Cardinal Joseph Tobin of Newark, 3 other Americans, and Cardinal Gerhard Müller, the former prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, in that number. Members of the Apostolic Signatura serve as judges who decide mainly appeals of lower court decisions, which touch on everything from marriage to movement or dismissal of clergy, etc. Cardinal Tobin is the only member of the Signatura with no legal education or experience. Father Jerry, your thoughts on that appointment?
Well, it was surprising if you go by the usual criteria employed, which was that cardinals who were canon lawyers would be the ones put on the tribunal of the Signatura, because they would be familiar with the law, with legal reasoning, and the procedures that were to be employed. Now, Cardinal Tobin's a smart man. He can study up and read and learn and be advised. But I think it's a sign that the Pope is signaling to the American bishops that he favors Cardinal Tobin and the way he is conducting his affairs and his influence in the national scene. Cardinal Tobin was also put on the Congregation for Bishops, remember. So he and Cardinal Supik are 2 of the members of that very important congregation. It's certainly a sign of papal favor. I'm glad Cardinal Müller was put on. He's not a canon lawyer, but he's a theologian, and having worked as the prefect of the Doctrine of the Faith, he's very familiar with canonical procedures. Well, the Pope appoints the people he thinks are qualified, and hopefully that they will do a good job.
Bob, I've got to touch on this. 6 years after Pope Francis first raised the possibility, and after persistent efforts, Italy's Bishops' Conference plans to launch their own 5-year synodal path. Unlike the synodal path taking place in Germany that was born out of the sexual abuse crisis, the Italian synodal path is entitled Proclaiming the Gospel in a Time of Rebirth. It focuses on this post-pandemic period. Your thoughts on this? Is every country going to have their own synodal way as we move toward that international synod on the synods?
Well, the part of the plan of the Synod on the Synods is that each diocese is going to have a synodal process of some kind, and then each bishop's conference. So yes, I think that in some ways, this kind of reluctance, because the Italian bishops really didn't want to do this. They were dragging their feet on this, and eventually, I guess, the Pope just kind of prevailed on them, so they had to do it. It's interesting, just today, there's news out of the Vatican. I think Edward Penton, our colleague, just reported on this, that the Pope met with Bishop Batzing, who is the head of the German Bishops' Conference, and actually affirmed that he wanted him to continue with what the Germans are doing. Now, I think this is an indication of something that's going to be very interesting about this synodal way. And we learned this, we saw some of this very starkly during the process of doing the synods on marriage, when the Africans and Asians and others were not on board with the sort of the first world shishi sexual revolution kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what each of these individual countries are doing. The Germans obviously are playing a cagey game where the bishops can deny that they're doing what's going on, and they kind of say that, well, it's this lay people are carrying forward this conversation, so they don't come into direct conflict with Rome, but they're complicit. Obviously, Rome is not very delighted with what our bishops are doing with our Catholic politicians who are pro-abortion. Italy has got something similar going on, because there's a law about to be passed in Italy that is going to require respect for homosexuality and trans people. And the church there has filed a complaint with the Italian government, because they're already seeing that it's going to impact Catholic schools in Italy. So things are different in various countries. We're going to see where this all goes, but it's going to be a very interesting next few years in the synodal synod. We'll see.
Yeah, Father Jerry, when the Pope exhorted the Italian bishops to proceed down this synodal path, and as Bob said, they were very reluctant. In 2015 in Florence, he said to them, a restless Italian church that was ever closer to the abandoned, the forgotten, the imperfect. It is useless to look for solutions in conservatism and fundamentalism, in the restoration of practices and outdated forms that even culturally aren't able to be meaningful. Father Jerry, your reaction to that, what does this tell you about this international synodal way that we're about to walk down?
Well, this looks, Raymond, like a slow motion revolution in which, people say that the outdated must go, the new must come in. It's inevitable. So why delay practices? Why just, start things off? It's very disturbing what Bob said about Bishop Batzing from Germany telling the world that the Pope has endorsed the German synodal way. The document produced by the German synodal way back in the winter is an heretical document, an attack on fundamental Catholic teaching. So far, Rome has not rebuked them for putting that document out. If this claim is true that the Pope says they have to continue in that way, then it's going to be up to the Catholics of the world to say, Holy Father, we think you're being misled and misinformed. This is not the way to increase and strengthen the church. This is the way to Protestantize the church, to make everybody a pope in his own realm. He decides what Catholic doctrine means for him. This is very disturbing. And the Italian bishops, to say that we're clinging to outdated forms and traditions, and somehow this is not relevant. Wait a minute. 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ came to the earth, saved us, and then entrusted the church to a group of men, the apostles. Everything they did matters 2,000 years ago and today. And the stuff that happened in between, the whole of Christian history, we shouldn't dismiss that as being outdated and some kind of traditional form not of use. Bob was referring to the Cardinal Newman when he was a Protestant in the Milan Cathedral. The beauty of Catholic liturgy, celebrated with reverence and propriety and devotion and faith, that's one of the most eloquent witnesses we have to God's transcendent presence on earth. It shouldn't be dismissed in the name of novelties and things don't work anymore unless we have something new. Why is it that we need so many meetings these days when we have so few people going to church? I would say less meetings and let's have more preaching. Let's have more missions. Let's have more out in the street, bringing the people into Mass. We're in an era of too much thinking about ourselves and less about what the gospel really demands.
We'll leave it there. Gents, thank you for the commentary. You can always follow Robert Royal and Father Gerald Murray at thecatholicthing.org. Thank you both. In the U.S., hate crimes against Catholics have been multiplying at an alarming rate. Why aren't media outlets and politicians talking about it? Joining me now to discuss this and much more, senior editor at the Federalist, Christopher Bedford. Chris, thanks for being here. According to the USCCB Committee on Religious Liberty, there have been at least 78 anti-Catholic crimes since May of 2020 across 25 states. Incidents include arson, statues beheaded or smashed, gravestones defaced, anti-Catholic language spray-painted on church property. You've reported on this recently, and frankly, you're one of the only people in secular media doing that. What's driving this increase of anti-Catholic hate crimes, and why are they largely unreported?
It's wild, and I'm careful with using the term hate crime, Raymond, because I know it's really overused. And typically in this country, if you hear the word hate crime, it often means that it's going to be pushed up, and maybe it's not even going to be true. Some of the most spectacularly reported ones have turned out to be complete and total farces. But you look through this, and the Catholic bishops are careful to discriminate between the different kinds of crimes. It's not just possibly kids breaking into their Catholic high school and spraying a fire extinguisher so they don't have to go back that day or the next day. These are, like you said, decapitating statues, desecrating statues of Christ, breaking centuries-old stained glass windows, lighting churches on fire, spray painting specific messages. These kind of attacks are spreading, and at the end, they've been increasing over the last 5 years or so in the United States by about 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-fold in different areas, sometimes even more. And talking to Catholic priests and talking to those in the neighborhood, talking to one on Capitol Hill, Monsignor Pope, who does a radio show with EWTN, had some very interesting thoughts. He said that over the last couple of years, as evil has not only become tolerated, but openly celebrated by large aspects of our society, the devil that used to hide or often hides in the shadows isn't hiding anymore. He's brave, he's out in the open, he's in the light, and people feel emboldened to attack statues, to attack people, to attack symbols of Christianity, to attack it in the Washington Post or the New York Times, to call Mary, Queen of Heaven, a racist symbol. When people feel that open at the top of the intellectual hierarchy in the United States, then it's just going to be open season on the bishops, on the churches, and on the faithful.
That is such an important point, Christopher, and you're the only one I've read who've tied it all together here, that these Catholic hate crimes, and you wrote this in your piece, they're not just about vandalism or wanton desecration. There's a dark aura coming from the nation's halls of power. You point to the 2017 incident when future Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett was told by Dianne Feinstein that the dogma lives loudly within her. And in 2019, when Brian Boucher was nominated for a federal court seat, and Mazie Hirono, the senator, and then Senator Kamala Harris, made him out to be an extremist for being a member of the Knights of Columbus. Why is there no penalty, or even less, no outrage for this anti-Catholic rhetoric?
And there was not even a lot of outrage from the GOP. Senator Ben Sasse, who himself is not even a Catholic, was the only person who went down to the floor and said, we're going to vote right now on a unanimous, non-binding resolution that says that the Senate condemns anti-Catholic bigotry, like we saw from Senator Mazie Hirono, we saw from Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, who think that Catholic teachings and Christian teachings are hateful, who view everything through the lens of the political. They want to subvert all things, the family, the parents, religion, and God to the political, and are completely amazed to find out that the 2,000-year-old church on earth and the Word of God don't fit into either Republican or Democratic talking points at all. It's so much bigger than that. But the bishops in the Catholic faith are always there for people, whether it's illegal immigrants or legal immigrants, whether it's the poor, whether it's the adoption centers that were invented by the Catholic Church, or that a lot of the schools. They're always there. They're willing to march with civil rights protesters. They're willing to march with protesters for freedom on July 4th as well. And because of that, they're completely taken for granted. Politicians, they don't fit into the different kinds of victim classes that people have held up, even though they include a huge amount of Hispanics. And my personal parish is a black parish. They don't generally fit into that. So politicians put their finger in the wind, decide which ways the wind is blowing, and decide that they're going to side with the radicals or the Satanists or anyone else who's attacking the church. And often, a lot of Catholic leaders they want to be cozy and happy with political leaders, so they don't even stand up for themselves.
I want you to react to the media's absolute outrage over the bishops daring to demand that Catholic public figures act in conformity with their professed faith. Watch this reaction to the bishops authorizing a draft document on the sacrality of the Eucharist.
We all know that there must be a separation between church and state, and I just don't understand how this has come about. When you really look at Catholic doctrine, why when the Attorney General Barr was pushing the death penalty, he's Catholic, which is also just uniformly opposed, according to Catholic doctrine. Why was he not, not permitted to receive communion?
President Biden has said before that while he believes in the Catholic Church's precepts on abortion, he will not impose those views on others. There's a line between separation of church and state in this country.
It's very dangerous to start blurring these lines around politics. I understand the Catholic doctrine. I've gone to Catholic school my whole life. I respect the separation from religious and state, but if this is an attack on Democrats or Joe Biden, I just think it is, the religious space beginning to go into the Washington politics, and we should stop it before it goes too far.
Second Catholic precedent in our history. I mean, for God's sakes, this man was just in an 8-day foreign trip in Europe and made time to go to Mass.
I think the big problem here is that the church is politicizing communion, which is a very sacred practice. The only way to protect the democracy is to keep the two apart.
These conservative bishops who are hanging on to power, they're not really religious, are they? They're political. And by the way, I thought the Pope was infallible. What happened to that? All of a sudden, they don't listen to the Pope?
Is this a form of intimidation we're seeing from the media? I mean, obviously, they don't know what they're talking about on any front here, Chris.
I mean, you could tell that they don't know what they're talking about right away when they assume that the United States Conference of Bishops are a Republican or somehow very conservative body. The New York Times called them an ultra-conservative body. I mean, when you have Meghan McCain as the only voice of reason there, standing up for the Catholics on The View, it was really wonderful to see. This has gone back a long way. People have been aghast at some of the Democratic politicians who've come out, who've just openly attacked the Catholic Church, who dared the bishops to deny them communion, and just because they commit mortal sins or not in a state of grace or not even seeking forgiveness. But it's a deal the bishops made, and a lot of the Catholics were willing to make for political power a very long time ago. And John F. Kennedy's speech, which is taught in civics classes as a great step forward for Catholic acceptance, he very specifically said, "I will not send a Vatican to the ambassador. I will not allow for children to be sent to Catholic schools or any kind of federal funding for Catholic schools. I will not accept what men of God or the bishops or the Pope even has to say on abortion, not abortion, excuse me, but on other issues, including divorce." And he said it will have no impact on him. And because of that, a lot of Americans were accepted. Once he actually was shot and was lionized, and a lot of Americans really accepted Catholics after that, he became a martyr for that. But he didn't, in order to be accepted by the American political establishment, he didn't embrace his faith, he completely shed it. A lot of politicians since then have become very used to that and very comfortable with that. And there's been such a pushback in the church even to punishing and holding the sinner to account as an act of mercy that we had a great redo from Pope Francis of canon law lately that called back, hey, you know what? We have to tell people they can't have communion, not because we want to deny them God's grace, not because we want to deny them the body of Christ, but because we need to draw them back to God, draw them back to a state of grace, draw him back to his teachings, and save their souls.
Yeah, no, that's a merciful act to warn people that they're going down a dangerous path, particularly when they're doing so in public and encouraging others to follow their lead. So, and that's really what this is about. And as we said earlier, Chris, it's up to the individual bishops to do something. The bishops' conference can't do anything about these individual souls, no matter how high their office or low. It's up to the individual bishops, and they have to take some kind of action. I want to return to this hate crime story, though, before I let you go. In Europe, it's a wildfire of anti-Catholic acts, hate crimes, more than 100 in France alone. Now President Macron in France is trying to redraw the line that separates religion and state. Macron submitted a bill to the parliament called the Law Reinforcing Respect of the Principles of the Republic that would empower the government to permanently close houses of worship and dissolve religious organizations without court order if it finds that any of their members are provoking violence or hatred. Now, the law is being submitted because of Muslim extremists. Your reaction to this law?
These are the kind of things that spread beyond that. The French Republic does not have a huge amount of respect whatsoever for the Catholic faith and long hasn't. People and faithful Catholics were rightly aghast when the Vatican recognized the Chinese state Catholic Church, where the Chinese communist government that's extremely anti-Christian was allowed to name bishops. Very few people know that outside of a small region in France, the same is currently true in France, where the government has the power to name bishops because of an anti-clerical law that went in. It's this country that has a history of having sacked Notre Dame and also of having recently helped demolish churches with priests being dragged out. This hatred of Christianity and Catholicism goes deep and long in Europe between the black magic and the death metal, but it's all those forces kind of coming together with a combination of secularism and an unwillingness to defend themselves, and also a huge amount of immigration that's brought some radically anti-Christian ideas from Africa and the Middle East. They combine to be a very dangerous place to be either Christian or Jewish.
Christopher, before I let you go, and you mentioned it a moment ago, China and what we're seeing there. The Apple Daily, Jimmy Lai's paper, they have ceased operations now. Many of the executives have been carted off to prison. Of course, Jimmy has been in prison. Jimmy Lai, the outspoken Catholic layman, billionaire, media mogul, he's been in prison since December. All of his assets frozen. Are you stunned that we've heard so little, not only from leaders in the United States, but from the Vatican condemning this in any way?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought it up. I'm trying to write about that this weekend for early next week, because here we have a literal or a modern version of a St. Thomas More, a billionaire who is willing to give up everything he has, to give up his freedom and possibly his life to stand up for liberty, and he's inspired by his Catholic faith in the gospel. How many billionaires in America are willing to give up everything they have because of the gospel and because of their love of Christ and their love of liberty? In the reality, in America, most of our billionaire class are willing to snuff out news about the persecution of Catholics in China to please their foreign masters. And we see the same thing a lot of times, unfortunately, a lot of politics with the church, which is far too willing to make compromises, forget saints, forget martyrs, and forget bishops who have been killed by the Chinese communists in the name of somehow making peace with a religion that wants to devour us, or with a state that wants to devour us.
Christopher Bedford, thank you for the commentary, and you can read more of it at Federalist, thefederalist.com. Thanks so much, Christopher.
Thank you.
My next guest is a longtime host of EWTN's Web of Faith 2.0. They're here tonight to share their latest book, Web of Faith, A Curious Catholic's Answers to Theological Questions. Please welcome Father John Trigilio and Father Ken BRIGHENTI. They both join us from New York City. Let's get right to it. This new book, Web of Faith, obviously based on the classic format of the EWTN program. You started, Father John, with Bob Levis many years ago. What inspired you to assemble this book now?
I have to give credit to Doug Keck. He's the one that asked if we would be interested in putting this into book form, because there's so many people that maybe have never saw the show or listened to the radio broadcast. And this was a fascinating project for me and Father BRIGHENTI. So it brought back a lot of memories of our dialogue going back and forth. But we made sure we set up the format that it would follow the same structure as the catechism. So we got the 4 pillars. That's how the book is basically divided.
Father Ken, you're a parish priest in New Jersey in addition to co-hosting Web of Faith 2.0. What have you learned from hosting the show? And how does this kind of Catholic apologetics inform your priesthood?
Well, first of all, I've noticed that a lot of the questions that people write in are questions that we sometimes deal with on a daily basis in the parish. A lot of people get confusing information out there, and so they're always inquiring about certain things of doctrine or liturgical practice or sacramentals or even history, and they're hungry for that. And people like question and answer format. I mean, I know that's the first thing I go to when I see a journal. If they have the question and answer section, I really enjoy that part of the journal. So I think that format works very well, and I think people also find that very helpful because they're nice little short, concise answers that they could use for their own edification or for people that may be doubting our faith or struggling with it.
Yeah, the book covers a lot of ground, from doctrine to liturgy, morality, prayer, and really everything in between. It's almost a Baltimore catechism for the digital age. Father John, how has the internet contributed to evangelization during this pandemic? I know you all have been doing your own web version of the TV show. Whose idea was that?
Yeah.
It was Father BRIGHENTI's. It was something for us to do, and we really enjoyed doing it. We worked with his parochial vicar, Father Matthew Marinelli. He was like our producer and director in that. And I saw the great opportunity, too, because even though we were in the pandemic and a lot of people were in lockdown, people were asking questions about the faith, and this wonderful medium of being able to have access, whether it's through social media like Facebook or just using regular internet access and YouTube and that. It's basically the same thing that we were doing at EWTN, albeit a bit more informal and not as high-tech or slick and polished as we do down in Alabama. But it was still the same sort of end goal, was to explain the faith and show that Catholicism is reasonable.
Because the format was so familiar to people, and we placed it on our YouTube, we were getting questions from all over, like Florida, Canada, as well as parishioners. So it was really kind of fun to see where the questions were coming in on a daily basis to the parish, and we had the opportunity then to answer it practically the next day.
Father Ken, you and Father John have collaborated on other books prior to this, most notably Catholicism for Dummies, that whole series. How does Web of Faith differ, this new book, from those other projects? And is this, did you cull the best answers from the years of your doing the show and sort of collate them here around topics?
Right. It does differ because it's more in a conversational style than the other books that we had written for. The other books are, more like the question and answer traditionally, the way they're done. But this is like the TV show. So we actually got the script from the TV series, and then of course we put it in good grammar, but it has that conversational flow. So I would answer part of it, and then Father Trigilio would answer part of it, and then might be a summation and some bits of humor in it. So that's the aspect where it's a little bit different. Where it's similar is that it's set up according to the Catechism, and we also have an imprimatur on it from my bishop. So it's which is like the good housekeeping seal for doctrine. So that way it's a little bit similar, but it is more approachable, I think, and more conversational in style.
Father John and then Father Ken, what's the toughest question you've ever received? One that made you go, I need to think about this a little bit, maybe do a little research.
Well, I'll say one that's a little with levity was people asked if Jesus had a pet when he was growing up. I said, I have no idea. If they find pooch or kitty's skeletons in the Holy Land, I don't know. But from the ridiculous to the sublime, some profound questions regarding how Jesus is present in the Most Holy Eucharist and how long is his presence in our soul after we receive Holy Communion. These are wonderful questions that you get typically as a parish priest, but even as teaching at the seminary. So we go from the whole gamut of the spectrum of the very easy or the very complicated.
Father Ken?
I think probably the more difficult ones would be the areas of morality, especially the areas where our culture is putting their approval on it, and of course the church teaches very differently because it actually could be very hurtful and harmful. And because the culture and the media have so bought into certain things and ideas, it has confused Catholics, and so you get many questions on that level. Maybe it's their children or their grandchildren who have been away at school, and then they're writing to us saying, I need some clarification for it. So, the whole gamut from transgenderism to same-sex marriage to cloning and all sorts of things. I would say those are probably the more challenging ones. The easier ones would be, like the sacramentals and things of that nature, which are kind of fun, and lives of the saints and all that. But the area of morality, which is being challenged in our by us today in our media, is probably where it's most important and also probably difficult.
Father John, what do you want folks to learn from this new collection and this particular arrangement of these classic questions and answers?
Well, I would like people to know that, again, Catholicism is reasonable, and obviously faith is something that you take it's a gift from God. So we're not proving the faith, but we're showing that the faith is reasonable and is not in violation to what we know through logic and reason. And that Catholicism is interesting, that we cover things that, from going way back from the beginning of time, Adam and Eve and original sin, but as Father BRIGHENTI just mentioned, from some very, new topical things like transgenderism, aspects of cloning, euthanasia, and issues like, giving communion, to politicians who support abortion. So I want people to know that Catholicism is here, it's reasonable, and I would say fascinating.
Father Ken, is there a danger of focusing too much on answers to basic questions and not the broader context, the historical context of where these practices, where these beliefs originated? Is there something lost when you're trying to communicate quickly with people? You know, those answer their questions, and at times that history shakes out.
Yeah, well, we try to, in our TV series, and of course then the book which presents these questions, is to give some historical background where we can. Because we always say that's part of our patrimony, and this is where our teachings come from. And then, so we always try to actually do that because it makes more sense for them as we develop, you know, our teaching in these later problems that we're, as a church, facing now in the 21st century. But the principles are existing from the time of our blessed Lord. So we always try to do that. We start that way, either from sacred scripture, or if we can, or from our doctrinal teaching and patrimony, and then lead them up to the present. So that's why some of the questions on the TV series could be very long, and some, of course, are shorter because of the nature of the question.
Okay, well, we will leave it there. Web of Faith, A Curious Catholic's Answers to Theological Questions by Father John Trigilio and Father Ken Briganti is available at bookstores everywhere and online at EWTNRC.com from EWTN Publishing. Fathers, thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Raymond.
Thank you.
That is all the time we have for now. Be sure to join us next week. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Bye now.